This is Groundwater Talk Live. I am Tom Ballard, the Groundwater Guy. Happy to be here with you today. And I did want to basically point out that today is a little bit of a departure from some of our normal topics because we're seeing with the war in Ukraine and the way the world is these days, we're seeing a lot of cyber threats heating up out there, and it's kind of a timely topic because we've seen a lot of ransomware attacks, and some of these things are pretty costly. Small water systems are especially vulnerable because a lot of them obviously don't have IT staffs and people that can handle things, like that. And what's happening is a lot of the hackers out there are targeting smaller businesses because they tend to have more vulnerabilities. The bigger systems, the bigger businesses have really ratcheted down their cybersecurity, and it makes them more difficult to crack. So the criminals are going after smaller businesses, and there's kind of a sweet spot out there for them. I mean, individuals is kind of hard to extract too much, other than you just disrupt their computer, and there's some weird stuff going on out there about that. But small businesses tend to maybe have some money that could be extracted through a ransomware attack or something like that, and so a little bit of a cash cow, not as much as going after a big business, but like I say, the big businesses generally have things locked down a little tighter. So the sweet spot really is there's enough cash there in those smaller businesses that makes it worthwhile for the criminals, and not a lot of cybersecurity. So that makes it kind of a sweet spot for the criminals. So we're going to talk today about some basic cybersecurity. Now, I am not, when we get into the ins and outs of the hacking and a lot of that stuff, I'm not an expert on that. But what I do is I do spend some time locking down our systems, and I've helped other people too. And there's so we're talking really basic stuff, and that's really what we're talking about for smaller water systems. You're not going to do the heavy duty cybersecurity. I mean, it's just kind of beyond the means of a lot of these people. But there's some basic common sense things we can do, and that's really what I'm here to talk about today. And so what we're gonna talk about then is we're really going to talk about the different types of attacks you might see out there, and then kind of the stuff that you can do that's easy enough for a small water system to do to reduce your risk. I mean, there is no system out there that cannot be hacked, is the plain truth of the matter. And so what we do is we make it hard enough that maybe the criminals will go looking for easier pickings, and that's the same theory on unlocking your doors. There's no locks that can't be broken, and no internet security that can't be breached at some point with enough effort. So we just want to make it so that the criminals will move on to somewhere else that they see as a little easier and not be an attractive target. So that's what our goal is today is to kind of talk about those basic things that small water systems can do that are fairly easy, that aren't going to break the bank, but secure you and make you a less attractive target, because I really think we're probably going to see more attacks on small water systems. We've already seen some attacks on water systems where they've got into chemical feed systems that are online and SCADA systems and changed some settings. I know there was one out there where they really ratcheted up the chlorine infusion rate into the system, and fortunately it got caught right away. But these are some of the things we're starting to see attacks on water systems, and it is critical infrastructure. Even the small systems are critical infrastructure. So we need to do what we can to lock things down and not make it easy for the criminals out there, because there are some vulnerabilities, and we got to take that into account. So before we get going here, if you can drop a comment in the chat, or if you're watching this later, any comments, likes, shares really help us with the algorithm to get the word out there. And, I appreciate all that stuff. I answer any comments if you post, especially if you post. Well, we stream into LinkedIn and YouTube, and I try to answer all the comments and respond to those right away. And I really appreciate all that feedback from folks. So drop a comment in the chat or later, and we appreciate that. So, okay, so on to our topic, and really, as I alluded to earlier, cybersecurity is not just for the big guys anymore. The criminals are going after smaller businesses because, quite frankly, because they're more vulnerable. The big guys have IT staffs, and these big water systems have people that's all they do is look at the security, and so it's more difficult to crack. Not impossible, like I say, but it's more difficult to crack. So these guys are out there. They're looking for, really, what it comes down to a criminal, even your common thief that's looking to break into your house. They're looking for easy marks that they can get in, they can get out, they can make a score. And so your job in cybersecurity is really to make it difficult enough for them that they won't spend the time and effort to try to break into your system. So there's definitely things we can do to discourage that. You need to understand, and what we'll talk about is the different types of attacks out there, so you understand where they're going to be coming at you, and then what you can do then to lock that down enough where it discourages them from coming in. Like I say, no system is unhackable. There just is not a system out there that's unhackable, and people that claim otherwise are nuts because you take enough time and effort and you can hack almost anything. So the trick is, like I say, to make it difficult, and that's as difficult as possible. And fortunately, there's some relatively easy things we can do to do that. So how did we get here to this point? And the world is a dangerous place, and I always say that some of these cyber criminals, if they'd work a real job, they could probably do well for themselves, because the time and effort they put into this stuff, they could really do some good, coding or whatever. But for whatever reason, they like the thrill of cracking systems and getting in there and making some money that way. And there's been some big scores out there. We've seen some ransomware attacks where different utilities have been held hostage until they pay a ransom, basically. And it locks up the entire system. All your data is inaccessible. Billing systems are shut down, and so it's certainly something serious. And so I guess it really comes, I don't have the mind of a criminal, so it's hard for me to understand, but I guess it's really the thrill of it and seeing if you can, break the system and get in and do a score. That may be the motivating factor. So, but so how we got here is we're just seeing, more people doing this, kids that have grown up, with scripting things and writing code, and pressing the limits on that. Some of these call them script kiddies or whatever are figuring this stuff out and how to break into things just for the thrill of it. So. Larger water systems now are increasingly harder to crack. They've kind of figured out most things to make it as difficult as possible, and they're not an easy mark, so the criminals are looking elsewhere. So there was a recent survey done, 2021, that said that 46% of cyber breaches are now medium to small to medium-sized businesses, and that's where the criminals are going. I think that percentage is going to increase. There's always the criminal out there that takes that really likes the thrill and the challenge, that will try to break into these bigger systems and the federal government and stuff. They're really, really crazy guys trying to do this stuff, um, but the guys that are looking for an easy mark, they're increasingly moving to small to medium sized businesses. And so we're seeing 46% now. I would expect that would be well over 50% in the very near future. So because that is the shift. So you as a small water system have a target on your back, basically. So that's why it's really important to take this seriously. So small and the thieves go there because small businesses often lack the resources to defend themselves. And they don't have systems in place, or they're haphazard in their approach to cybersecurity, and so there's some vulnerabilities. And a lot of these things, software vulnerabilities and things, some of these exploits are known out there. They get traded around on hacker billboards and on the deep internet and or the deep web, and so so some of these exploits are known. So you don't patch your software, for instance, and it's a known exploit. It's easy for a cyber attack to come in and get into your system. So that's unless you're paying attention to that, it's these criminals stay on top of this stuff. So now, in monetary costs, here's it in 2021. Here's how the numbers shook out. So the cost of a data breach fell between $826 and $653,587. So they did a survey, and the average was around $188,000. So if you're a small water system with a couple hundred connections, that is huge. That really is, and it can break the bank. And as a matter of fact, for not necessarily water systems, but a lot of small businesses, they get a breach like this that costs them this much money, and their system gets messed up, and they lose data. A lot of those businesses go out of business. I mean, it's that probably wouldn't happen to a water utility, obviously. But it can really cause long-term damage. So it's really worth looking into this. And like I say, we'll focus on some common sense things you can do, or relatively easy things you can do to make it difficult. But there are some real monetary costs, and this isn't even calculating in the actual time of the people in the water system and the business to fix these things, and scrambling around and I can tell you, just dealing with some computer problems, how much time I invest in that, and that's not even a cyber breach, So you start going in and trying to figure out where they are in your system and what's been affected, and checking your bank accounts and your credit card statements. There's a lot of time involved that isn't in this number. So the actual monetary cost is one thing. But the cost in time and materials is you can add that on there as well. So that's why some small businesses actually never recover from this. So here's an interesting statistic, and something that should really open your eyes, and that's why I got it in a different color here, so it stands out. So according to a survey from digital.com that checked on this stuff, 51%, or over half, of small businesses did not have cybersecurity measures in place as of March 2022. So this is just a few months ago. 51%, over half of small businesses, had no cybersecurity measures whatsoever. Absolutely wide open, vulnerable to attacks and exploits. So you can see why this area of small businesses and small water systems is ripe for the picking by the thieves and the criminals, because a lot of these businesses, no security whatsoever. thieves can walk right in there, and it's like walking into the store. It's like walking into a jewelry store, for instance, and you got all these diamond necklaces and jewels and everything just out there in the counter, and they just walk in and scoop it up and walk out the front door. So that's pretty much what the equivalent of what we're talking about here. So don't do that. Don't be one of the 51%. Let's get that number down, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So. All right, so we're going to talk about, so you understand and giving you a little background on these things, the common cyber attacks that we're going to see on your system. And so these range, and we're going to talk about these in a little more detail here. So malware, viruses, most people have heard of those. Most people have heard of ransomware, which is a particularly insidious one that's pretty popular right now. Phishing, um, distributed denial of service attacks, hacking kind of takes a lot of different forms, and a lot of these things kind of overlap. Malware, viruses, ransomware, phishing, kind of there's a lot of overlap in these different categories. And then I got some other ones that I'll talk about that are a little bit more complex, but you need to be aware of them because they can do long-term damage. So that's those are kind of what we're going to look at here. So I'm going to just kind of explain what each of these are. Malware, software that's intentionally designed to cause damage to a computer, server, client, or computer network. Malware can include viruses and ransomware, so that's that overlap I was talking about here. So it's really designed. Most malware is really designed to mess up your system. So so it's and sometimes it's just people, malicious actors out there. They'll put this on your system, and a lot of malware will be self-replicating, so it spreads around. So somebody connects to your website, and your web pages are infected, and they can get malware, and it passes around that way. So it's kind of insidious that way, but generally, except for ransomware, it's really designed to do damage to your system and not change things or monitor things. Viruses, these are usually things you're going to get in emails. There's going to be some malicious code. They're going to try to talk you into opening a document or log in somewhere to a fake account, and then it'll inject a virus onto your system, and these once again are pretty much self-replicating. A lot of overlap between viruses and malware, but most people think of viruses as being spread by email, and that is generally true, but we're seeing fewer viruses out there, and it's let me turn my phone off here. I apologize for that. We're seeing fewer viruses out there now as people focus more on the ransomware and the phishing attacks. So that's more common. But I still get virus warnings every day in email. So it's still out there spreading around. A lot of these are older, so the code is known, and virus software can pick it up fairly easily. So virus software has become a lot more sophisticated. So viruses have kind of lost their popularity. So a lot of the viruses we see are ones that have been around for a while, not a lot of really new ones out there. There are some that get increasingly sophisticated, but a lot of the viruses you get in your email now are older ones that have been around for a while, and they're more malicious code, and so they're designed to do damage, not so much to collect information. All right, now ransomware. This one is one we're seeing is more popular these days because there's a direct cash reward for the hackers that get ransomware in your system. And the way it works is it's a specific type of malware. It basically infects your system, and it locks everything up, and it restricts access to your computer or server until a ransom is paid. Usually they're going to want the ransom paid in Bitcoin, so it's harder to track. Uh, and they say that they will release your data and give you the access code once you pay the ransom, and that's kind of sort of true. But usually there's lingering effects from this stuff. Even when you pay the ransom and get the code to unlock, there's lingering problems, and so it's not a clean unlock. So you really want to avoid ransomware if at all possible, because it's pretty hard to get things back, even if you pay the ransom. And some of these ransoms get pretty good size. So um, usually the ransomware is delivered through something like a phishing email, and exploits and unpatched vulnerabilities in software. That's why it's really important, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later in the show, is to patch all your vulnerabilities. When you get software updates, especially the security updates in your software, it's important to install those updates right away, because they're updating it for a reason. Sometimes it's just bugs, but even bugs that are not uh, exactly vulnerabilities in the software can be exploited in a number of different ways. So it's important that all those updates be installed, as soon as possible after they get released. So um, that is one entry in, and like I say, hackers trade this information on the deep web, and so a lot of these exploits are known, and they have means to exploit them. So if you happen to be one of the unlucky ones that they selected you, they'll come in and they'll try all these exploits and see if they can get in. Um, I know, just as an example of some of these exploits, WordPress is a real common software used for websites, and because it is so common, any exploits and vulnerabilities in the WordPress software is actually well known, and hackers know what they are. So there used to be kind of a default password, and an administrative access that was kind of came default, and a lot of people wouldn't change that right away, and it's amazing. I used to have a website in WordPress. I went away from it for this very reason. But I had some software installed where I could see where the attacks were coming in. We were stopping pretty much everything, but we could see where the attacks were coming in and what they were trying to do to get in. And it was typically the hackers would come in and they would go after known exploits like administrative passwords, file structures that had weaknesses in them, the default stuff. And so all that stuff was stuff you needed to change when you installed it, but a lot of people never got around to doing it. And they were just, a year later, they're still using the same default administrative password and completely vulnerable. And so a lot of WordPress sites got hacked. Security in WordPress has gotten a lot better these days, but it's a big target because it is installed on so many websites, and if the hackers can find an exploit there, they will. So and coming in through WordPress site with vulnerabilities is one way in, and then you get the ransomware into your system. You have interconnected your server, your accounting system is interconnected. They get into your server, and boom, now you're locked up, and they're demanding a ransom. So a lot of ways in. You got to kind of think like a hacker sometimes. All right, phishing. This is another real common one these days, and it ranges from everything from the Nigerian prince emails that were popular, and I still see those from time to time, where some prince in Nigeria has $100 million he needs to smuggle out of the country, and he's willing to split it with you if you'll just give him your bank account information. And everybody's probably seen these things, and they take different forms. Some of them, appeal to Christians and they're pretty insidious. And most of those are pretty easy to ferret out. Nobody's going to give you $50 million. I mean, you may think you're that likable, but nobody's going to give you $50 million in exchange for helping somebody smuggle something out of the cash out of the country. If you only give them your bank account information, so 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 that's those are particularly obvious. Now, phishing is really, they're going to try to get you to do something. Give them your bank account information, give them your login information. That's really what they're looking for there. There's several different forms of phishing: spear phishing, regular phishing, but phishing emails typically appear like they're coming from a legitimate source. The ones that you really got to watch out for, stuff coming from PayPal, uh, Bank of America, and they send out, a million of these things, and they say it's coming from Bank of America. They got the logo on there and some semi-official wording, and so you look at that and say, I mean, it goes out to enough people that say, well, I have a Bank of America account, and so they may click on it, but the thing is, the stuff you got to look for is that, for instance, your bank is not going to send an email to you that says "Dear customer." That they're going to use your name, clearly. A lot of these are coming from foreign sources where their English may not be the best. So you look for misspellings. You look for weird things where they just kind of cut and pasted stuff in there and it's a little fuzzy. I do have to admit that these things, the ones I've seen recently, are getting better. And I know there's stuff that out there where I've come like that close to clicking on things, and I'm excessively paranoid. If I get something from PayPal, for instance, I'll log into my PayPal account and look at it that way and not click on a link through an email if it appears at all suspicious, or if you had, I don't know, there's a Venmo account, if you had a PayPal account, some of those things, I steer clear of that stuff because, PayPal I think is pretty good. Some of the other ones, I don't, I don't know, but they're usually what I will do if it's at all suspicious, I will log into my account through secure internet, and you can check on the internet. The little lock, it's going to be HTTPS for secure hypertext protocol, and that's the way to check. I seldom will follow a link through an email, even if it doesn't appear suspicious on the surface. So if I get an email from my bank or something like that that I'm not expecting, and it appears a little off, I'll just log into my account and check that information there. And it's one more step. It's real easy to click a link in an email, but sometimes we get busy. We don't check it as thoroughly as we do. So the discipline to actually log into your account and do it that way is a lot safer way to go than a link in an email. So there you go. But anyway, the phishing emails, a real common one these days. And like I say, they are getting better. The English is getting better. They used to be full of misspelled words and odd grammar and stuff like that no legitimate business would ever use in English. So you could tell them that way. Now they're getting better, and like I say, they're hard to discern. So if there's any reason at all, just log into your account through the web, through a secure portal, and check on the message that way, and don't click the link in the email. That's really important. People just the way phishing attacks work is people just click through and they provide the information before they even think about it. And so we're so uh, basically trained. I guess you'd say we're trained just to click on that link in the email and it'll take us somewhere and we'll do something and we don't stop to think about it. But we got to stop to think about. We got to have a security mindset is really what it comes down to. So once you go through and you click, you go to that website or you click, then your computer becomes infected with malware. So hopefully you have good malware or antivirus software installed that deals with it if you make that mistake. But try not to do that in the first place. We got to have a security mindset and be suspicious of anything that looks just even a little off. That's important. All right. Distributed denial of service attacks, or DDoS for short, is not really gaining access to your system. These are situations where a hacker has gone out and they've basically installed code. They've hacked into a number of computers, a bunch of computers, and so what'll happen with the DDoS is they will then basically activate all these computers. So the program that they've installed on these computers, and it can be thousands of computers, and the program is just lying there till it gets a command. And once it gets the command, what it will do then is they will send streams of data to a particular IP address, so your web address, and or your internet address, I guess is your IP address. So so what'll happen is you'll be having so much data coming in, it will overload the system, and so it'll slow it down, it'll shut it down. You'll see these distributed denial of service attacks out there, and it's basically just a brute force attack. It's not damaging the information on your system, but it's basically shutting down your system and making it impossible to do business while the DDoS is going on. The answer to that is using things like Cloudflare or some third-party services that offload that DDoS traffic and basically don't allow it to reach your site. So Cloudflare is probably the big one for that, and most websites should have a Cloudflare account, and here's a plug for Cloudflare. Cloudflare, not my favorite company, but they do they do good work. There are some other competitors out there that help on that as well, and some people have their own custom solutions. But Cloudflare's an easy one, and it's easy to install, and there is a free level actually for small systems. You can do paid levels that will do more, of course. But a basic, if you're a small water system, a basic Cloudflare account will help you. Will pretty much do what you need to do to deal with DDoS attacks. So that's that. Hacking. There's a lot of different varieties of hacking, so it's kind of a general term, but basically it's gaining unauthorized access to your computer systems through a variety of methods. So social engineering is one, and this one, there's some variations on that too. Phishing could be considered a form of social engineering. But getting to know people, checking their social media profiles, for instance, and trying to gather information, and like birthdays, for instance. A lot of people use their birthdays as passwords or stuff like that, and so it's pretty amazing the information you can gather on people on the internet. And hackers can do that. So social engineering is one way to do that. Password cracking, there's a number of different ways to do that. Just guessing. There's some some password cracking programs where it just basically does these dictionary attacks where it just goes through and it tries to log in using a variety of just basically going through the dictionary looking for common words and phrases and trying to guess your password that way. So key logging, you need to have access to the computer. So if you know, if you type a phishing email, what happens sometimes is they may install a keylogger. Keyloggers are basically, they're logging the strokes on your keyboard and storing them and then reporting back to the hackers organization on what your keystrokes are. So with that way, you can gather data on passwords. You typing in your password, and the keylogger captures that. Boom, they're in. So there's some ways around that using password managers and and cut and paste that makes it a little harder for keyloggers to work. But we still see keyloggers out there, and a good virus or malware protection program should look for keyloggers too. But software vulnerabilities we've talked about a little bit, and we'll talk more about that too. But it seems like every new edition of a program, Microsoft Windows, is particularly notorious for introducing bugs every time they come out with a new version. So, and then there's endless patches that come out to patch this vulnerability, and now you fix that vulnerability and you introduced a new bug. So now we got to patch that, and so it's a constant thing is finding these things, patching them. Hackers are out there constantly probing. They're looking for information out there on these things, and the software companies, when they announce a patch, will let you know what is to patch. And basically, the downside to that is that the hackers know that a lot of people don't install these software patches right away. So they will take that information, they'll look into the software and probe it and see where the exploit can be found and try to devise a way in. So if people haven't patched it, they're out there probing these different systems looking for unpatched software. And it is relatively easy to log on once you get access to server, or even going on to somebody's a website and seeing what version of this software or that software they're running on their website, and you can tell if it's been patched or not. So it's there's a lot of tools for that out there. So it's pretty amazing the information you get. So software vulnerabilities are a huge route into your system. All right, insider attacks. This is just what it sounds like. Somebody on the inside with administrative privileges, either on purpose or by mistake, gains access to the system, shares confidential information, or they log into something, they respond to a phishing email, and I don't know if I'd call that an insider attack. Usually, an insider attack by definition is somebody that's actually doing something malicious. So somebody's mad at management, and so they're gonna hack in and give themselves a raise or something like that. So I don't, just an example, a poor example probably. So that one would be caught right away, of course. But sometimes you can do some damage. Now, one constant worry, most of the time that's generally low, but it is still a threat. But the real threat from insider attack is former employees. So you need to have a plan to basically change passwords, and every employee should have individual passwords and access, so you can track that online or on the system, who's accessing the system and when. And any former employee should have their access credentials revoked immediately upon their departure or termination, and so that they can't gain access to the system. Now, sometimes an employee that's planning to leave for certain reasons may install viruses. I mean, and this gets a little more insidious. So and so that they can gain access later, even without the credentials, or sets up some secret accounts, and so you got to monitor the system for that. There's I say, there's all kinds of different ways to get into these things. So insider attacks, um, man in the middle. This is a little bit more sophisticated attack. It's basically something like a fake website where somebody would send you to, and it looks like an official website. You know, if I can go to my back to my Bank of America example, or you know, pick another business, and it looks just like the Bank of America website. You log in, you give your access credentials, and boom, it's a fake website, and now they got that login information. So that's um, also, what will happen is, and this is something you really got to be careful about if you're out. You know, it's great to go to Starbucks for coffee and log on to their free Wi-Fi, and have some you know, relax and do some business and stuff. But public Wi-Fi's are notorious for people sitting there, and that person sitting next to you with the double mocha latte, uh, if that's a real thing, um, may actually be running a sniffer program, or some program that is logged on and is capturing data as it passes through their system. And some of this stuff gets pretty sophisticated. So they could be sitting across the room for you, and basically then all your data that you're sending out there, and you're checking your bank balance or something, on a free unsecured public Wi-Fi, and they're collecting all that data. So that's something to really keep in mind. If you're using a public Wi-Fi, you should be using a VPN, and you should probably not be logging into your bank account or anything that's really sensitive, or data that should be secured. So don't use public Wi-Fi for that type of thing. If you want to check the news, that's one thing, you know, or log on to your social media accounts. That's one thing. Checking your bank account on a public Wi-Fi that's unsecured, probably not a good idea. And if you need to do something like that, I always recommend running a VPN, virtual private network. That software is available. It's usually a subscription. There are some free ones out there. I recommend, if you're going to run a VPN, you use a paid one, because the paid ones are generally going to be a little bit better. So a VPN, really, if you're using public Wi-Fi, is really something you want to have. And they do have VPN access for even mobile devices as well, because mobile devices, as we'll talk about here in a little bit, are a big security risk as well. All right. A little bit more of a sophisticated hacking technique is the Advanced Persistent Threat, or APT. And this is a long-term threat. What happens is the hacker gains access to a system, and it's usually kind of a multi-phase thing. They'll go in, they'll get basic access, then they start probing around, they'll come back later, they may tinker around and see what's in there, then go back and check with their hacker buddies and find out exploits for this particular system. And then over time, they're gaining access to more and more of your system. So they may install backdoors in there. So even if you figure out the route they got in the first place and lock that down, there may be additional backdoors or access points they've installed. So these are pretty insidious and hard to root out. And so you got to look for the signs, and it's really important to monitor your system, and really logging access to your system, and checking out any IP addresses that you don't recognize coming into your system. And there's some easy software to do that. You know, anything will run through, and it'll collect IP addresses, so you know who's coming and going on your system. So that's a pretty sophisticated one, and that's one that they usually go after bigger prizes. But even smaller systems are becoming more vulnerable to APTs. All right, so now you kind of know the different routes in, and hopefully I haven't scared you off too much from ever going on the internet again. But with all those things, but those are the routes in. There may be some that there's some variations that I haven't totally covered, but I wanted to make you aware of those because what we're going to want to do is look now at what small water systems can do, and one of the things is you got to think like a hacker, and you really want to get in there and think about what your vulnerabilities are. So we, I like to say common sense goes a long ways here, but it's important to just not leave things open, and lock everything down. Think about it, and lock it down. So. The first step really is to identify your risks and vulnerabilities. So, like I say, think like a hacker. If you can't think like a hacker, ask your kids or your grandkids. They'll probably tell you, and they'll probably have ideas for you on how you can gain access to systems and where your vulnerabilities might be. So don't be afraid to ask them because they grew up with this stuff. We don't always, unless you've studied it, really understand some of these things and different routes in, and there's new stuff all the time. Keeping track of this security stuff is just a full-time job in itself. So you gotta, but you gotta understand your basic risks and vulnerabilities. So that is important here. Another one is if it does not need to be connected to the internet, then disconnect it. I mean, we got everything connected to the internet these days. We got doorbells, we have refrigerators. For Pete's sakes, we have toasters that are connected to the internet, and the same works for water systems. You could probably have a bunch of stuff connected to the internet that you don't need to. I mean, for Pete's sakes, do I need to really be able to Bluetooth in, or log into my toaster from a city away to set the setting for how dark my bagels toasted in the morning? I don't think so. So some of this has reached the heights of ridiculousness, basically to sell product, but more realistically for things like a water system, think about the stuff you have connected to the internet, and does it really need to be connected? I mean, it may be a pain, but say your accounting system, you could have that on a on a separate computer that's not connected to the internet. Now we may need to do software updates and that type of thing, but but we can do that. There's ways of doing that securely. So if you really want to lock things down, lock it down. But but think about anything that doesn't need to be connected, then disconnect it. And that's one less route for hackers to come in, because you don't always know. Some of these devices out there, they sound great, but they may have vulnerabilities built in. I mean, and we know that there's been computers out there that they've come from the factory, a lot of times in China, with chips built into them that may be, providing data elsewhere. Nobody's really been sure, but it's suspicious. So you may have done everything, but the equipment you're using may have some vulnerabilities. So disconnect it if you don't need it actually connected to the internet. If it has to be connected to the internet, make sure it's secure, and we'll talk about a bunch of different ways to do that. But obviously, it is pretty convenient to be able to log into your SCADA system from the internet. But we want to have that locked down really well. So that's important. Okay. Managing connected systems, you want to password protect all systems, and it's amazing how many people just don't like using passwords. It's a pain to using passwords, but you got to have them, and really different passwords for everything different. So don't reuse the same passwords. So you want to limit physical access to people that absolutely need access to those systems. So not everybody gets administrative privileges on water system's main server with all the data. So sorry, you know, you don't you don't need administrative access. So it's there are ways of setting up limited access to different areas. So only people that absolutely need administrative access should have that super user status. So others should have more limited access, and you can set that up. So and regularly monitor your systems for unauthorized access. You should know. You should be able to know and recognize employees coming and going and log that. If you got strange stuff coming in from China and Russia, you know, or Ukraine, you know, that might be a bad sign. So you want to watch for that. All right, so password. Let's talk about passwords. In 2021, based on data breaches, here are the top 10 passwords from 2021. So the bottom line is, don't do this. it's you know, the number one password, 123456. I'm thinking that's going to be one of the first ones that a hacker is going to try to use. You know, and boy, you can really get really sophisticated. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You know, a hacker's going to get that instantly. So you might as well not have a password. You know, and some of the other ones you can see different combinations. All these are known to the hackers. They're really easy to guess. You don't want that. You want passwords that are going to have a lot of complexity to them, and are not going to be easy to guess. Don't use your birthday, you know, or you know, that's one that's very easy to find out on the internet. So tips on passwords: use strong passwords. And a strong password is going to have uppercase, lowercase. It's going to have numbers. It's going to have special signs like an asterisk, things like that in there, and some combination. Now the problem with those is they're going to be hard to remember. So that's why I say down here in number 3, use a password manager program. These are going to be locked down, and your passwords are going to be there, and it's a secure way to remember all these passwords. You're going to want to use separate passwords for different accounts. Don't reuse the same password, because if a hacker gets your password for Facebook, you know, and you used it to get into your accounting, so you use the same one to get into your accounting software. Not a good idea. And so the hacker gets your Facebook password, and now they're into your accounting system. So not a good idea. Use separate passwords, which means we end up with a ton of passwords. I can't even tell you how many passwords I have. I use a password manager. I use one called 1Password, but there's a lot of different ones out there, and it'll live on your computer. It locks things down pretty tight, and you can sync it between different computers. So they're relatively easy to use, and they make having a lot of passwords as painless as possible. Don't write down your passwords. This is a real common thing. People put it on a sticky note and put it above their computer. Okay, you have vendors coming in and out of your office doing different things, and your password to your accounting system and your bank account is written down on a sticky note above your computer. You know, not that we don't trust vendors, but you know, there's a potential breach situation right there. So don't write down your password. And wherever possible, use two-factor authentication. You see this out there where you'll put in your email, and then it'll take you to a separate page. You'll put in your password, and or they will actually send you a code on your cell phone, and then you got to insert the code. So two-factor authentication, while it's more of a pain to use to get in, it's really a lot more secure than just having a straight password. So I like two-factor authentication. I admit that I hate typing in those codes and waiting for it to come to my phone and typing it in, but there you have it. It's a lot more secure. Install software patches as soon as possible. We kind of kicked this around earlier, but once again, software is going to have vulnerabilities. The hackers are going to find these vulnerabilities. So, basically, software upgrades and patches are the software companies trying to stay ahead of the hackers and constantly patching. The hackers finding new vulnerabilities and boy, I got the hiccups here. So I apologize. I don't know what happened. Get a drink here and see if that helps. So you're going to want to install those as soon as possible, because if there's a patch being issued, a security patch, it's for a good reason. The hackers have that information, and if they happen to find you and you haven't installed that patch, you are vulnerable. Use antivirus and malware detection software that continually scans emails and incoming files for threats. This is important. Everybody should have antivirus and malware software on their computers. There's a bunch of good ones out there. So it's and there's some free versions that work for most people. I tend to use the paid versions just because I like to lock things down a little more and do some deeper dives in my security. So, I'm doing stuff like monitoring stuff that's coming into my computer, where it's coming in, what's going out, and if anything's going anywhere suspicious, then I get alerts. So, so I'm ultra paranoid, but we really try to lock things down that way. So. Um, Install enable fireware software to limit outside access to your system. So this is going to be password protecting, and it's going to filter traffic that comes into your system. So you should be running a firewall on your servers for sure. That's not even negotiable. You should have a firewall up and running, and I'm not going to dive into exactly what a firewall does, but it provides a barrier between you and the outside, basically. So that's what. So it's something you're going to want to have installed, just without question. Know who has access to your online systems. And this is part of assessing your risks. I mean, who has passwords and who can gain access to your system, even if they have limited access. A good hacker can take that limited access and sometimes exploit vulnerabilities to get in deeper into the system. So you want to know, and you want to limit access to people that don't really need access to your systems. Not everybody needs to get into your server. So, and think about that. I mean, some people obviously do, but other people don't necessarily. But you can firewall off different sections of your system. There's some different things you can do to control the access. But for people that don't need access, then don't give them access, and it's just one more way to secure things. Employees, train employees on proper security protocols. Everybody should have a security mindset. Don't be opening random emails and clicking links. I worked at a company one time where the lady in the front office, bless her heart, she would, because I was kind of the office geek, and she would get these emails and she would forward them to me and say, "I just can't open this." And it's kind of like, "What are you doing?" It's like it was virus emails, and she was clicking away on it, trying to open it, and so she'd forward it to me so that I could open it and tell her what was in it. It's kind of like, so it's kind of like I had to sit her down and really educate her and show her what was going on here, and yeah, just something you don't want to do. So we want to develop that security mindset and have everybody thinking about it. It just should be, if anything doesn't look right, uh, don't click it. Like I said earlier, go to the website, the secure website, and access it that way. We're so conditioned to click those links in the email, and we got to get out of that mindset and be suspicious, because that's probably the most important thing you can do, is be suspicious of these things, because phishing emails are really counting on you just having that click reflex. I'm just going to click the mouse, and that's how phishing emails work, and that's why they're successful. So, and then, like I mentioned earlier, have a plan for revoking data access from former employees when they leave. So you change their passwords, or you deactivate them, and so that they can't get access to the system. Vendors and contractors, you want to limit the physical and online access to what's necessary. If they need to access the internet, consider temporary passwords for them to get in. And then once they're done doing what they're doing, then you delete that password off the system. So that's one way to do that. For software vendors, change the default password immediately when they install software. If it's got a default password attached, change that immediately, if not sooner, because that is a real common way for hackers to get in. So, all right, we duplicated that one. Backups. Back up your data regularly. Very, very important. You want to regularly back up all the critical data on all computers. Back up the data automatically or at least weekly. Store your backed up data in the cloud or off-site. And I would add an additional one is keep multiple generations of backups, because if somebody has installed a virus on your system or some malware to gain access to the system, then your backup could have it in it. And if you reinstall that backup, it can reinstall the malware with it. So you may want to go back a ways and look. There are ways to scan that. Once you've identified what the malware is, you can scan your backup to make sure it's not there. But multiple generations of backup should be kept, and you'd store that off-site. I've seen people actually download stuff on physical hard drives once a week and haul them off-site and keep them in a safe somewhere. Cloud services actually work pretty good and are pretty secure. You're going to want to check them out to make sure that they are using top-level encryption on that. But that's another way to do it, and those work well with automatic backups. So that's important. I'm getting some. All right. What did I do here? I lost some information, so I apologize on that. Let me go on to the close here. I wanted to talk a little bit about mobile devices too. I had it in here. I lost it. I must have deleted it somehow. But mobile devices are another way into the system, and they're inherently a little less secure than desktop systems. So you're going to want to secure those. Put a VPN on them for accessing public Wi-Fi if you do that, and password protect everything. If it's a company mobile device, then you're going to want to make sure the data on there is encrypted. But strong passwords, the same rules apply to passwords. Everything should be password protected, and they should have they make VPNs for mobile devices. That should be installed on there as well. So a real common way for hackers to get in is through mobile devices, and because they get used a lot in public Wi-Fi that is unsecured and vulnerable. So you're really going to want to look at those, securing those mobile devices, and it's something that a lot of people overlook. And even companies that allow people to bring in their personal mobile devices, there should be a company policy that those need to be password protected as well, and secured in some way. So because if they're in the office and they have access to things, then it's not out of line to ask people to secure those mobile devices, because that is a potential security vulnerability. So that's what I got for you today. I definitely ran a little long because there's a lot of stuff to cover there. Sorry about the glitch at the end. But I did want to thank you for listening, and hopefully this will give you some ideas on just basic things you can do. A lot of this stuff is not really onerous to do. It's just, like I say, developing that security mindset and thinking like a hacker, trying to think like a hacker, all the vulnerabilities of your system, and then fix those vulnerabilities in ways that and like I said, a lot of these things we suggested here don't cost a huge amount of money. It takes a little bit of time and really training your employees to think about this stuff, but it's really just being smart about how you operate and be suspicious. Like I say, it does not hurt to be suspicious. If it doesn't look right, then it probably isn't. You know, don't automatically click everything that comes in an email. And so these don't cost you anything other than thinking about it, and it's just good procedure. So hopefully that will help you. I would really like to see that 51% of small businesses that don't have cybersecurity really come down a lot here in the coming years, because it's really needed, because I think the cyber attacks are only going to get worse, and they're going to be increasingly going after smaller businesses. So very important to lock things down. So that's my presentation for today. Hopefully you got something out of it. I wanted to point out I got some classes coming up. We do the well health check class about every couple months. The next one is coming up August 3rd. That's a 1-hour class on running diagnostics in your well and really assessing what's going on in your well and keeping your well healthy. So we have a class coming up on that on August 3rd. There's the link to register for that. And it's an interesting, fast-moving class. We do offer CEUs or California contact hours for that class. We also have our systematic well management class coming up. This is July 12th through 14th. This is a 6 contact hour class. It is run 2 hours a day for 3 days in a row, kind of designed around water system managers' schedules, so that they can come in, do the class the first 2 hours of the day, and still get out and do things. So that's what we have coming up in the way of training. This goes into a lot more detail, obviously, in 6 hours on every stage of the well's life, through locating a well all the way through decommissioning it and everything in between. So I think it's pretty informative. We we cram a lot into 6 hours. You get a lot of information. All right, so streaming channels. We stream into Groundwater Guide channel on YouTube, and then my events on LinkedIn. You can always contact me any of those places. Post likes, shares, comments. I really appreciate that. And if you want to be a guest on Groundwater Talk Live, we're interested in having people that want to talk about water issues on. Here's the link for that. You can book a slot, and we'll get you on and have you share your information. So I'm always looking for interesting guests. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the Groundwater Guy YouTube channel. Hit the bell if you want alerts on when we have new videos. We do this every week. So we'll look forward to seeing you next